Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I'm Rhett Power, your host. Today we're going to talk about money on the show, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I always like talking about money. That's a good thing. Now, the point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world, people that we can learn from. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a lot of learning about money because I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about how money works. We'll see if my guest agrees or not. Anyway, this show is on Facebook. It's on LinkedIn Live. It's on YouTube, Twitter, a couple other platforms. And the whole fun part about that is that you can interact with us. You can get on the keyboard and ask your questions. We monitor those feeds during the program. And so, you can ask your questions of the guest. That's the whole point. Now, if you like the program, give it a like or share so that your network can benefit and we can grow our audience a little bit. I've got Chris Miles today. He is a cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. I'm curious as to what an anti-financial advisor is. I know what my opinion of financial advisors is. So that'll be an interesting conversation. He's a leading authority in teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them. He is the co-author of the book Entrepreneur on Fire and a podcast host of the Chris Miles Money Show. He's been featured everywhere, U.S. News, CNN Money, Entrepreneur on Fire, great show that is, and has a proven reputation with this company called Money Ripples of getting his clients fast, life-altering financial results. In fact, he's found over $200 million in the last 10 years. And cash flow for his clients. Chris, welcome.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on, Rhett.
How you doing? How you dealing with COVID?
That's the cool thing about working from home, right? It's like you're already working from home anyways, but now when people tell you have to stay home, now you don't want to ever stay home. That's the that's the ironic thing.
Yeah, I know the feeling very well. So do you think people understand how money really works?
No. To put it bluntly, not any fault of their own, right? I definitely don't blame people for not knowing it. It's purely because no one's teaching, because the people that are supposed to be the money experts don't know how money works either, right? I learned this 18 years ago. When I first started, I actually started out as a traditional financial advisor, and I did that for 4 years, and I started to realize that when I met people that actually were either retired or financially free or millionaires or multimillionaires, really, right? When I started to talk to them, they would laugh at the advice I gave as a financial advisor, right? They would scoff at it. They would make fun of it. They would say, yeah, that's great. And it wasn't clear to me. I started to get little doubts, right? Because when I ran real numbers, like when I figured out that the market does not pay you 10 or 12% a year, like everybody says it does, it's more. In the last 30 years, the average has been closer to about 7.5. Even though we're at the market high right now, it's still about 7.5 return per year. And that's before you have fees taken out and everything else. You're likely to get 6.5%. So when I started putting in real numbers, I started putting in numbers that actually made sense, and then putting in real inflation numbers, not what the government tells us, but what actually real life prices have been telling us, right? They started to realize, wait a minute, it's virtually impossible to retire using mutual funds and the traditional retirement plans, 401ks, IRAs. It's all crap. It's one of the biggest Ponzi schemes out there right now. But that everybody tells you, hey, that's what you should be doing, right? And everybody tells you to spend nothing, save everything, save it forever, and then someday, if you're lucky, especially if you save it in the mutual fund, the stock market, which is bipolar, right? Then someday you might get lucky and be able to retire. And the truth is people aren't. And when I started to really run the numbers, then I had this conflict, right? This integrity conflict, which is, all right, well, this is my livelihood. Do I keep teaching this or not? And finally, I remember I met with a guy who was a real estate investor, and he said, Chris, and he started asking me questions like, well, how many of your clients are actually financially free? I said, well, none, not even the retired ones, because they'll still worry about money, even though they have money, right? Because they're worried about running out of money. And he's like, okay, well, good job, Chris. He's like, well, here's the big $1 million question. how many of you guys as financial advisors that you or yourself, whether it's you or other people that you know, other financial advisors you know, how many of you guys are financially free, not off the commissions of selling the stuff that hasn't worked, but actually doing the stuff that you've been telling people to do by investing in your own mutual funds, right? And I was like, well, that's a good question. I started thinking about it. I said, none. Maybe one guy. I was thinking of a guy in my office that might be, found out it was all show. He was totally not, because once he got fired from the company, he was scrambling trying to find work because he didn't have the money. He didn't have money coming in from the investments. It was always coming in from the commissions that they were being paid. And that's what I mean. It's kind of like a big Ponzi scheme, right? Like, the people are getting paid, the people running the investments or selling the investments, we're just salesmen in suits. And that's what blew my mind. I was like, oh, I'm teaching the wrong thing. And so in 2006, March of 2006, I finally just said, I'm out of here. I can't teach this stuff anymore. And that's the ironic thing. When I stopped following that advice, the advice I was giving, right? If I basically went against and did all the opposite of my own advice and focused on cash flow and real cash flowing good investments, not stock market gambling, that's when I was actually able to retire when I was 28 years old for the first time.
What does that mean? And not the retirement part of 28, but what does it mean? You stop looking at all the traditional advice. So, talk about what that looks like, what that is.
Yeah, there's a few things. So one I kind of mentioned, right? Like saving and that whole accumulation, compound interest type of thing, right? Like they always tell you, hey, if you let it grow over millions of years, it'll become something, right? And so they try to sell you on this long-term game, which is brilliant. Really, it's brilliant marketing when you think about the financial industry, right? Everything you've been taught, it's supposed to be mainstream media, mainstream advice, has really just been a sham because they're telling you, wait forever. Well, by the time you get to forever, it's already too late, I witnessed this with my dad, who was the very forefront of the baby boomers. He was born in 1944. And he did everything. He was debt-free, just like good old Dave Ramsey would tell you to be, right? He was saving and stuffing his money in his 401k and everything. And I remember right before Y2K, he was thinking, I think I'll be able to retire in my 60s. And then Y2K hit. And all of a sudden, he's like, never mind. Maybe I'll never retire. Maybe I'll work until I'm dead. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard that are even current baby boomers, but on the backside of the baby boomer generation, and now Generation X of my generation, right? How many people are saying, I don't know if I'll ever get out of this mess because right when I think I'm getting ahead, the market decides to change its mind. I got to wait another 5, 10 plus years before it gets back to where it was again, and that's the thing is that, by the time you get to the point of saying, hey, I've been saving for 30 or 40 years, this didn't really work. Most of the time you just hear the media telling you, oh, well, it's because you weren't saving enough, or Americans are spenders. That's why, you're spending too much money. But I know people that are like Dave Ramsey poster children, right? They paid off all their debts. They saved and maxed out their 401ks. And still, even though they might have a few $1 million, they realize this isn't enough. For example, like when I taught people how to figure out what number we had to hit, right? We had to figure out inflation numbers and everything and project out to the future how much you have to save and then only live on, it used to be 4%. That was the thing back in the early 2000s. Well, now financial advisors are wising up a little bit, the good ones. They'll say, really, if you want their money to last, you got to pull out no more than 2 or 3% a year. So think about this. Even if you go on the top 3%, right? Say you happen to save up $2 million. That 3%, now you're living on $60,000 a year. But with inflation, depending on how many years out that is, that might be poverty level. It almost is right now. 60,000 a year is nothing like it was almost 20 years ago when I was first telling people about it. I thought 60,000 a year was living the life. And now it's nothing. No. So that's the thing. So we're hearing that stuff. We're hearing people saying, pay off all your debt, right? Like get debt free. There's people out there teaching that stuff. But the truth is that I keep talking to people. People keep coming to me saying, Chris, I got debt free. And now what? Right. Because if you pay off all your debts, sure, you might have freed up 25% of your expenses, but you still have to pay the other 75%. So even if you used all your money to pay off your debt, now you're at zero. You're like, wow, now I'm at zero. Now I got to figure out how to get enough cash flow, enough income coming in to pay for my other 75% of my living, And so that's the thing is that even paying off all your debt, I've seen people go debt free. And even if they have great paying jobs, they feel trapped. The whole screaming on freedom to the Braveheart music on Dave Ramsey's show doesn't work. Those people, after they're done screaming freedom, go home and realize, wait, other than being debt free, I'm not really free. And so that's the thing, is that's what I mean by doing the opposite, is that, I'm not saying now you go into horrible debt, right? I'm not saying be an unwise steward. I'm all about wise stewardship of your money. There's good ways to use debt and there's bad ways to use debt, right? There's good ways to invest, even if you invest outside the stock market. And there's people that do a horrible job investing outside the stock market, like in real estate or whatever it might be. It's not about the to do, right? It's not about the thing that you do. It's about understanding, have the right knowledge and knowing how to do it wisely, how to do it right. I always tell people it's not about working harder and it's not even about working smarter, right? Because you can study and listen to all these podcasts and learn how to do it smarter. But the truth is, if you don't do it right, it doesn't matter. Like you can study all you want, but if you do it wrong, you're just doing it wrong worse. It just makes it worse for you. So that's the key, is that you figure out ways to do it the right way, and then things work out in your favor.
How do you find good advice?
How do I find what? Sorry?
How do you find good advice, right? Because you can't be the financial person for everybody in the world here. So how do you get good help? Somebody
that's the hard part. It really is. I mean, you can find like books out there. I'm not the only one that's teaching this kind of stuff, right? I mean, a lot of people have read Rich Dad, Poor Dad before. I mean, there's a lot of similar things that are taught in that book. The problem is when somebody goes and looks up, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, then they find some program you have to pay $50,000 to be a part of. It just sells you on some strategy, right? And then there's negative reviews up the wazoo because, it's not, those people aren't financially free. I knew some of those people that were on those phones talking with those people, coaching people, making $12 an hour. They weren't even doing it themselves. And so there are some voices in the wilderness though that are doing it. Obviously, like that's kind of what I do as well. Like even though I'm semi-retired, nobody will let me retire. That's the truth, And Mission doesn't want me to retire either, because when I realize there's people suffering needlessly, like there really are people that are out there that have everything they need to be free, but they just don't realize it. They don't know how to see it from the right perspective and figure out how to make it work. Right. Give an example. I had a guy recently that reached out to me and he's saying like, hey, I would love to quit my job as a teacher. Like, especially with COVID and everything, he's saying now my job is even worse, because now I got to do more work trying to figure out online versus live and all this stuff, right? And they're not trained in school to do that stuff. And he's an artist too. So he's the kind of mind, he's like, no, I don't want to be stuck doing this. Well, I realized like they had a few $100,000 in IRAs that they were just, sitting there hoping that it rides up and down with the bipolar market and stuff. They had some equity in their home and things like that. I was like, listen, if we actually put your assets to use, we could actually get your passive income to replace the income you've been pulling in as a teacher. And I said, I'm like, you could try to do it this year or next year. You could actually retire. If you do go a few extra years, you can definitely even get to the point where not just you retire, your wife retires too, and that's the thing. They create like this, what I call an income avalanche, where, say his goal was if he had at least $4,000 a month of passive income, he would be there. And I said, hey, I think we get you there pretty quick within a few years. But if you take that $4,000 a month or $50,000 a year, right, and you reinvest that, and that adds another $500 a month on top of it, now you're at $56,000 a year. And then you add another $500-600 a month on top of that by reinvesting that. And now you're at like $62,000 a year or so, right? And it just kind of keeps building. And it's actually like compound interest, but it's compound income, right? And it gets exciting. And so that's the kind of stuff that, every time I think I'm going to retire and just like, listen, I'm just going to forget it. It's an uphill battle trying to teach against the mainstream and against the grain. But then when I see something like that, I'm thinking, this is awesome. Like, this is where there's hope. And that's really my ultimate message is there is hope, even though you don't see it in so many situations. There's so many people where there's it's incredible. It's amazing what you can accomplish and shift the mindset that you have right now that could create something brand new that you never thought would happen even the next 5 to 10 years.
Talk about your 7 secrets plan to free up cash.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig into what you did with that teacher, because I think a lot of people are in that sort of similar boat, right? They've got, they've done okay, right? They've been diligent, they've saved, they've put the money away. But but like you said, it's just sitting there, and it's not really working for you. It's working for somebody else, right? It's working
Right.
for friends. It's working for a lot of other people, but it's not necessarily working for you. But you've been responsible. You've done the putting the money away, and you've saved, and you've done done smart things in some respects. But talk about your first. Let's talk about your 7 secrets. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the funny thing is those 7 secrets came from not just smart moves, but being dumb too. Right.
Yeah,
And
fair enough.
so,
I think too.
which is the best life experience, isn't it? That's one thing I've learned, that people learn more from your mistakes than they do from your successes. And so I mentioned I retired the first time in 2006, right? And now back then I only needed like 3,500, 4,000 a month to be able to retire. Well, yeah, of course after I retired, I got bored. My wife at that time, she said, "Hey, get out of the house. You're driving me nuts." So I tried to find something to do. I started teaching people how to get out of the rat race. Well, this was 2007. I decided to come out of retirement and I partnered up with some guys that were also out of the rat race themselves. And so we're basically doing and teaching. Well, the recession hit right in 2007, right? All the people we were teaching were real estate investors, but not the good kind, like the kinds that were gambling. So they were going broke. I cut off a bunch of my streams of income to focus on that business, which means I was going broke. And I went from like millionaire to upside down millionaire in the matter of about a year. I went from, being, having more than enough money coming in like air, you just don't even think about it, to the point where I said, holy cow, I tracked my money and found out I'm in the hole about 15,000 or 16,000 a month that I was leaking. I was like, what am I going to do? And by the way, and now people would say, oh, well, you're over $1 million in debt. No, even if I was debt free, I was still in the hole every month. It would have been less of a hole, but I was still in the hole. So being debt free was not the answer. But my expenses, the business and my personal life, were way higher than what I was bringing in at that time. And so I had to figure out how to get creative, right? Because I didn't have any credit by that point because I maxed out everything. I was going late on things. I even lost my home in 2009, So, I was at a point where I'm like, wait, I got to get this stuff figured out. And so I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race. I changed the message because I didn't want to be out of integrity once again, right? So I was like, well, one thing I'm doing really well is I'm getting resourceful. I was able to dig back out, at least to be managing and breaking even every month. At least I'm paycheck to paycheck now, right? So how do we get resourceful? And that's where the 7 secrets came in. So things like tracking money, right? That's a big one right there that surprisingly a lot of people don't do. Because some people, even if they track the money, right? Sometimes you get the people that will, right? But even when they do, they're not really figuring out what to do. They're not taking any action steps with it, right? Like I have a guy, he's like, I've been tracking my money for the last, 4 years since I last coached with you. And now I'm kind of back to paycheck. It might even be a little negative. And I'm like, you're making 150, almost 200,000 a year. How are you going negative? It's like, I know your lifestyle is not that extravagant, but he's like, but I'm tracking my money. I'm like, yeah, but are you doing anything about it? Are you changing anything? Well, no, that's the problem. Like, I'm just watching it. Like, well, watch it go bye-bye. That's what's happening. So tracking money was a big thing. Once I started doing that, then I started to realize, okay, now I know where I am. Now I know where I need to get to, and I need to start making changes, right? And what's a productive expense? What's destructive to me? What's just consumptive? Something I could have, but I don't need, that kind of stuff. I really started prioritizing more. I mentioned like debt. One thing with debt is there are certain debts I'll pay off, but it has nothing to do with the interest rate. I realized pretty quickly that if I have a limited amount of cash, if I have a negative, cash flow coming in, I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Do I invest it or do I pay off a debt? And I started looking at it like debt, like an investment, like which one will pay me the most money per month, either by saving money by paying off that debt or by making money with an investment. And so I created a little formula I call a cash flow index that I said, all right, let's figure out like which one will be the most beneficial. Essentially, which one has the balance, basically the lowest balance, the highest payment ratio, right? Not necessarily the lowest balance one, but the one that has the highest payment in relation to that balance. Or in a sense, if I pay it off, what gives me the biggest bang for my buck, right?
Right.
So I started looking like paying off debt like an investment and started doing that, Then of course, there's finding the resources. Like, hey, do you have, net worth anywhere? Do you have equity anywhere? You mentioned that early on, right? Like I find so many people right now, they got equity in their house. Now the conflict is there's everybody out there telling you, don't use the equity of your house. In fact, if anything, get it all the way paid off and then you're debt free. No one can take it from you. The truth is that I have friends that buy real estate properties by buying the tax lien that are paid off free and clear. You'd never own your house, just so you know. And even if you think you do, once you die, it doesn't go with you. Like the Egyptians already figured this out, sadly too late, right? Because they realize, oh, I'm just going to rob their graves. You don't take it with you to the afterlife. Like whatever you have is just stewardship now, right? And so can you be a wise steward of the resources you have? And so I'll often find people where I say, well, listen, you got equity trapped in your house. What if we could use that for something? One case, for example, somebody had $120,000 they could access from their home. The home equity line of credit would cost them about $400 a month, which is amazing, cheap money for 120 grand, right? Now, if you're a business owner, think of it this way. If you're a business owner, if you can't make $400 a month with 120 grand, you should not be in business, right? If you're an investor and you can't make at least $400 a month with 120 grand, you shouldn't be an investor, or you got to learn how to figure it out, like in either case. But it's like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Like 120 grand, we could easily make you at least $1,000 to $1,200+ a month with that. And so even though, it costs you 400, if we make even just at least 1,000, we make you $600 a month with no money out of pocket, right? Like that's, and even then they're like, yeah, but what if something goes wrong? What if we lose our jobs? I said, even better. You have 120 grand. How long can you pay $400 a month with 120 grand? And they said, well, forever. I said, that's the point. If I were to go back in time to the last recession with my situation, because I was in a situation where my equity was trapped in my house, I didn't have it. No lender said, hey, yeah, you're negative cash flow. I definitely want to give you a loan, know? And then when I tried to sell the house, nobody, of course, they wouldn't let me, sell it because they said, well, the mortgage is too high and the values are going down. So we don't want you to sell it. Well, how about if I short sell it? No, we don't want to let you short sell it either. Even though I had offers from people to buy it, I ended up foreclosing on the house for $170,000 less than the short sale offers. Just because the banks, one was owned by Lehman Brothers, of course, naturally. The bank, I did get a settlement from it for a whopping $300 for the mortgage fraud that they did. That was awesome. That definitely made up for the hundreds of thousands I lost in that house, But that's the thing is that, it was gone. The equity disappeared in the process of me trying to sell the house. If I had that money in my own pocket, right, and in my control, I would have been just fine. I would have weathered through that recession just fine, figured my crap out, and been okay. But that's the key is that the only time that you need money is the time that banks never want to give it to you, right? The best time to get money is when you don't need it, Obviously, you need to have a plan that goes with it, but that's the key, Here's the cool thing, too. Here's another tip with this. COVID, because of the CARES Act, if you've got money trapped in 401ks and IRAs, you can, if you've been affected in any way, shape, or form, whether it's been the health of a loved one, whether it's been the financial situation, like if your hours got cut back, or maybe they didn't give you as big of a bonus even, or anything, or even if you got furloughed for a period of time, or whatever it might be, right? If you had any effect at all, you can actually access up to 100 grand of your IRA or 401k money with no 10% early withdrawal penalty. So you still have to pay tax on it, but they'll even let you spread out the tax over the next 3 years. So I'm having a ton load of people saying, Chris, I think this is the time to get my money out of the market now because the market just came back and recovered a little bit. And now I can even get less tax on it. And of course, the tax rates right now are the lowest it's been in decades, the Trump tax. And so, hey, this might be my time. This might be my perfect storm, my window to get this money out and get it working for me finally, instead of sitting there and hoping it's growing for something someday, right? So it's an awesome opportunity right now. For most people, you have high equity in your homes. You got the market that's recovered a little bit from where it dipped just now. You're in a great place to get cash out, and be able to put that cash to work for you to actually give you good passive income each and every month. It's a beautiful time right now to get money working for you.
So that when you talk about that passive income coming in, what is that? So let's say I take out that 50,000 from my IRA, or that 100,000, or the 80,000 I just got sitting in the bank. What do I do then? I mean, how do I put that to work?
there's lots of different things you can do, and every situation is different. I always tell people to go with what you actually enjoy, because the one thing I learned from retiring twice is that you don't want to do investments that you actually don't like. Because once you get to the point where you don't have to work anymore, right? And you might still keep working if you want to, and that's great. But it's nice to work because you want to, not because you have to. But if you get to that place, you don't want to have investments that you say, oh, I hate this thing. This is just draining me of energy. That's not how you want to live life. It's about living a good quality of life. So everybody's different, but give you a few examples. One, on the lower end, right? There's different people out there that say, hey, we can crowdsource money to buy an apartment building. We'll kind of, pull everybody's money together to tackle an apartment building. You become a partner in it. You even get some tax breaks on that money and things like that. But maybe they pay you 8 or 10% a year. Some even pay more than that. I'm going more on the conservative side. I know some people would say that sounds high, but in truth, that I'm thinking like that's kind of an okay number if you only make 8 or 10% a year. But think about that. If you have $100,000 you put into that, that's giving you about 8 or 10 grand a year. Remember, when I said $100,000 in a retirement account, if you don't pull off more than 3%, that's $3,000 a year. That's nothing to be excited about, right? But if you can have passive income coming to you on a regular basis of at least 8 or 10 grand a year from just $100,000, just think about what it takes even to get to whatever that goal is for you. If your goal is 5,000 a month, great. Well, then in that scenario, 500,000 is all you need. And by the way, normally if you wanted to retire on, 5,000 a month or 60 grand a year, like I said, you got to have about $2 million. I think $500,000 is a lot easier than $2 million to tackle, right? That's on the low end. There's buying real estate properties. If you buy good, what I call turnkey real estate, right? So not just the typical real estate, like some people do rentals, they'll do rental real estate, but they buy it in their own backyard. In the most cases, people that do that, horrible. For example, I get clients from California. They'll say, yeah, I've got a rental property here in California or anywhere on the West Coast, Oregon, Washington, doesn't matter. I was like, okay, you probably want to sell that. We haven't seen the numbers, Chris. I'm like, I can already guarantee when you give me the numbers, it's not going to be good. Right. And in almost every case, Western United States is pretty bad. But there's places actually not too far from you. There's places like in Richmond, Virginia, that are pretty nice. There's places in Pennsylvania. There's in the Southeast. You've got like places around like North Carolina or Alabama, or in the Midwest, like Missouri or in Indiana. There's good markets where you can make easily at least a 1% a month type of return. That's like 12% a year. So if you have $100,000, there's a pretty good chance if you buy the right properties, there's a good chance it could be like $1,000 a month or so. I think that's pretty cool.
Easily. I mean, I have a strategy in this in terms of, I won't divulge it all, but to an extent, I mean, we look at military towns and college towns and places that aren't impacted by recessions and aren't, but good solid markets. And it can be life changing when you find the right properties and with the right rental history and the right, it's long-term stable income.
The more boring the market, the better. That's how I say it. Like, boring is sexy. I used to think sexy was sexy. So this would be like before the last recession. Like if you were buying in Phoenix where it was hot, no pun intended. Or Las Vegas where properties were going like crazy. But then when the crash happened, they crashed hard, right? Because they were hyped up. California kind of has that, situation in certain areas too, but when you're Seattle was like that a couple of years ago too, right? But there's some places that it's just, slow and steady. Like it's just nice. They pay good cash flow. They're not going to make a huge appreciation necessarily. They'll still appreciate over time, but you're not banking on that. You want stable, regular income coming in each and every month. And personally, I love what I refer to as turnkey properties, where I don't manage the property myself. I hire a property manager in that area to do it for me. Because people are like, Chris, you're in the West. Like, why would you want to buy out away from you? Do you go out and visit these places? No, not at all. That's the beautiful thing of internet. Yeah, it's awesome. Like I don't have to. Like now, granted, I have to do my due diligence in different ways to ensure that I'm doing it right. But that's the thing. Like buying property, I think real estate, even right now, even with COVID and everything else, real estate has been one of the few places that actually looks awesome. And now with rates dropping, now it's even more profitable. Now I'm seeing, I'm again, no guarantees, of course. I'm not giving investment advice or giving any guarantees, but I'm seeing properties right now where I get blown away that you can make 15 to 20% or more cash on cash return. Like that means, again, same $100,000. Now you're making 15, 20,000 a year from 100,000,
Right.
Again, it's always case by case, and it depends on the property and what your guidelines are and things like that and your resources. But there's good investments out there, and it's a complete game changer. That's what got me excited in 2006 when I started to see that numbers could be different, that I could get a better return than 6 to 8% in the stock market, and it's the compound effect of trying to live off the less than the interest, right? To now creating passive income where now more money's coming in, you need less money to be able to create the same amount of income. Then all of a sudden my world blew up. As a former financial advisor, I said, oh my goodness, why would I want to teach this stuff as a financial advisor, right? Because there's a whole much better world. And let's look at results, real reality. Millionaires, if you look at the millionaires or even billionaires on the list, they all have businesses and or they've got real estate. They've got real assets. They don't invest in mutual funds. That's what broke people and poor middle class people invest in. That's the little carrot they dangle in front of you so you stay broke. You can break free by doing something different. But the thing is, the different is the thing that's been proven to work, where mutual funds have been proven not to work. So why are we doing the same old crap just because everybody else is doing it? The other, out of 300 million Americans, maybe 250 are totally sold on buying crappy mutual funds. But the other 50 million are saying, good luck, guys. We're going to become millionaires by buying real assets that actually mean something and create real income. That's the difference.
What else? What are some other things that people are doing right now to use that money? If it's just not, aside from real estate, there's some other investments that people are making.
Yeah, and real estate even has so many different facets, right? Like in the last week, I've had 2 deals with people I know in my own mastermind groups where they got an assisted living deal in Connecticut, right? You can buy into senior living, which is a big growing market with the baby boomers right now. You've got self-storage, which right now I knew that commercial wise, that was like the one that would probably be doing the best during COVID, because as people start downsizing, when we go into recessions, people downsize, they use self-storage, right? But those are all still real estate based. One area that's different is I had one client in Hawaii that said, Chris, I want nothing to do with any kind of real estate. I just am not interested in it at all. And again, going with my philosophy, which is you should do something you enjoy, right? The one thing he found he enjoyed was oil. He's like, I'm really intrigued by oil.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And he started buying his own oil wells. And I said, hey, buddy, that's like a hit or miss thing. That's risky. Just trying to buy these random oil wells that may or may not produce. I said, here's a fund over here. Check out this group over here. They got a fund that invests in like 40 different wells. So even if there are a few of them that are duds, you still got other ones that are going to be making you money, right? And so right now, in fact, I remember in March, I even had them, I even talked to them. I said, hey, with everything crashing, remember when it went negative for a day? When we had negative futures prices on the oil side? I said, how are you guys handling? Because you guys said as long as it's over $25 a barrel, you're fine. They said, we're still fine, because we're not buying May futures. Like that was the thing that was going broke, right? I said, no, that's not our deal. We're looking long term. This is fine. We're going to have no issue. They're like, in fact, what's happening right now is a lot of these companies are going bankrupt. We're buying their good producing oil wells at half the cost. So right now they're saying, hey, you may not make great cash flow on this, but from a growth standpoint over the next 3 to 5 years, easily we might be able to double our returns, like create 100% plus return on this money. And not to mention, by the way, for the next few years, it might change after that, you get 100% write-off with oil investments. So if you invest 100 grand, you also write off 100 grand on your taxes. So if you're saying, hey, I'm pulling out 100 grand from my IRA, but where can I put it? Like if I don't need the cash flow necessarily, but I want it to at least do something, where could I put it? Well, one option could be is say, hey, if I still have to pay tax on 100 grand, why not write off the 100 grand at the same time? So I paid 0 taxes on that money, and then I get that money back out later, and voila, now 3 to 5 years, I've not only made returns off the oil, but I could do something else with it to create cash flow. There's different options you could do, but it just depends on the area to look at.
Seems like it's a golden age right now too of buying a business. With baby boomers retiring, with COVID, there are businesses out there that need the influx of money, and it seems like a great time to buy a company or buy a business.
Yeah, I actually recently on my show, I had somebody that helps people match them up with franchises, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Um, and a franchise is another place you can actually use IRA or 401k money to invest. You can actually keep it inside of an IRA if you wanted to. You may or may not want to, but that's an option, right? But yeah, businesses could be great. Again, it depends on the business, right? It
Sure.
depends on what you're trying to do, of course, because you can end up buying that lemon if you're not a good business owner anyways, or
Right.
if you don't have those kind of skills. That might be the first step before you try to jump into business, because business
Well,
can be
I know a lot of business owners who are saying, okay, I've got some money set aside.
Mhm.
This is a great time to sort of maybe think about using that and maybe expand what I'm doing here, maybe look at another town, similar
take over.
company, take over,
I see that's a business that's local.
Yeah, I mean, or just expand my business types and, buy a company near me. But I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of opportunity, particularly if you're business minded and you have some cash. It's a great time to use it for that.
Right now, just having cash is essential. That's why back in March, I was telling people, I said, listen, like I guarantee the banks will start limiting lines of credits, especially with whether, not necessarily SBA, but especially with getting home equity lines of credit. If you want to get cheap money, I said, just wait. Like whenever there's a recession, they cut them back. And I even told people, I said, even if you have an open line of credit, you might want to max it out, which sounds completely counterintuitive to what any advice is given out there. I was like, listen, like I've been there before. I know what happens in recessions. I know how banks react. We don't want to be the ones that all of a sudden say, hey, I've got this money. I'll just use it whenever I need it. And then also the money's not there because the banks say, never mind. You got to ask mom and dad for the car keys. And we say, no, you're grounded, right? Like it's your own equity. You should have access to it. So get it out, So that's a very real thing. And you're right. Business can be an amazing time because where people are not surviving, right? Any recession is a great way to weed out who are the real players and who are the fakers, right? Because anybody can make money in a good market, but it takes a special kind of person to make money even in a bad one and find the right opportunities and be able to adjust and move. And I've had clients right now, they're buying out their competition. Some of them are expanding their businesses more. One of them said, hey, since I'm having to be shut down in my dental office, we decided we're going to build out more chairs, which would be completely counterintuitive. But they say, hey, we've got the cash here. Let's build more. And then as things come back up, we're pumping money into marketing, even when we can't do much. And then marketing going, then the marketing's already working by the time now they're reopened. They're saying, great, now we're busier than ever, and it's such a great time. Like this, stop watching the news. If you stop watching the news, you'll start to realize that there's a lot of opportunity to create. And there's people living in fear that just are going broke. And again, I don't want people to go broke, right? That's not my intention. But, there are people that are going broke saying, I will take the money. I will take this business at a discount if you can just get me out of it. So it's a win for them because they want out, right? But it's a win for you because you're buying at a discount. You're buying something that's cheap that you could turn around and create cash flow from if you know what you're doing.
Right. No, that's the whole takeaway I think from today is that this is such an opportunity to grow your wealth, and some great tips on taking that IRA. I mean, I love that you can. That's great advice. Looking at how you can leverage your IRA, or maybe your home equity, and get it out and start putting it to work. That's fantastic. Do people? I mean, you have a different take on debt, and I know it scares a lot of people. It scared me when I first went into business. I got used to it, right? You get used to the debt. Talk about that. Because it's not all bad, and I think people have the wrong mindset about it, don't they?
Yeah, it's all stewardship, right? It's how wise a steward can be with this money. How much can you get to work for you? And so, like, for example, I run into some people that are Dave Ramsey fans, right? And they'll even say, hey, in the Bible it says don't go into debt and all that kind of stuff. And I say, also in the Bible, the biggest teacher in there is Jesus, right? He's kind of a good guy to listen to. Well, in the Bible, he actually shares a story about the parable of the talents, about 3 servants that were given money. They were loaned money from their master. All 3 were in debt. 2 of them went and doubled their money that they were given. One of them, who was a Dave Ramsey fan, decided to bury it because he didn't want to be debt free. He didn't want to risk it. He just said, I'm going to bury it. And then when it comes time to give the money back to that master, I'll give it back. So at least I won't be in debt. Now, there maybe should have been a fourth servant that said, hey, I was given 3, I lost all 3. What do I do now? But that would be more like, other people. But I think it's key because that person that buried it, dug it back up, gave it to the master. And the master said, no, get out of here. You knew what I required of you. You didn't do anything with this money. You didn't make an increase with this money. Get out of my kingdom, right? And he gave the 1 talent to the guy that made 10. He actually gave it to the person he knew would make more with it. And I think that's a very universal principle in general, is that if you're going to get debt, right? If you're going to use debt, use it in a way that produces more than what it's costing you. That is the key. If you go with another key, if you were to agree with Dave Ramsey, live within your means. 100% agree. I don't think you should, just like the example of the guy that got 120,000 out of his HELOC at $400 a month. I don't think you should put it into something like a 401k or the stock market where you're gambling it. Don't put it into, try to ride Bitcoin or whatever, right? Because you never, Bitcoin goes in weird waves, right? It's unpredictable. You want to put in something that's more predictable, that's safer, that you can control the returns. Just like you mentioned earlier with business, or it could be in real estate and things like that, where it's much easier to predict and know, here's exactly what I can create with this money, right? Again, it's all about who you are as a steward. Are you a wise steward of that money or not? If not, if you're a horrible spender and you're just going to blow it anyways, then don't get it out, right? But for those of you that are learning to be better stewards, or you already know, hey, if I put X amount of dollars into this, I will make X amount of dollars, right? If you're that formulaic, man, you cannot get enough money. Right. You could use more, all the more money you can get. And you might even have people say, hey, if you're that predictable, I'll give you money. I even had a client of my own. She actually ran assisted living facilities. Her and her partner would both put in $50,000 each into the business. After the 13th month, they start taking draws. They would make anywhere between $5,000 to $25,000 a month each in dividends from the profits from that business. I'm thinking, wait a minute. And I remember she came to me for real estate advice. She's like, I've got some extra money. What do I do with it to make passive income? And I said, wait, you can take $50,000 and make, after a year or so, $5,000 to $25,000 a month. That's between $60,000 and $300,000 a year from $50,000. I'm like, there is no real estate property I can show you right now that would be able to do that. You should put more money in your businesses, And she did. And now it's been almost exactly 2 years. She just came to me. She's now selling one of those businesses. Forget this. Her portion is about $1.5 million profit, right? Which now I was like, great. We can take, even if we do some tax strategies to save on taxes, if you only had about 1.2 million to use, that can easily generate $100,000 a year for you in passive investments, And I told her, I said, listen, like, let's get debt. Even before this, I said, let's get you debt. Like, even if it's hard money, that's okay. Because if you can afford to make the payments and then you can turn around and come back and pay them that, it's awesome. And I was even tempted personally. I was this close. If my wife hadn't stopped me, I was this close saying, I'll give you $50,000 to start a business. I'll charge you this much percent interest, and then you pay me that 10% or so interest a year. Right. And, I was about to do that. And I was like, no, all right, I'll listen to my wife. She happy, me happy. But that's the thing. Like, someone who does the right things, you can't give them enough money. And that's the ironic thing, is that when people are wise stewards, you have more money being thrown at you than you can even handle. Like, I get more offers for anybody who wants to throw capital at me, and I don't even need the money. It's like, well, thanks, but I don't need it.
No, I think that's the key, right? What you said is the discipline, because if you don't have that discipline, it's a disaster.
That's right.
And whatever you do, I mean, that's the there are a lot of strategies that'll work, but if you don't have that discipline, that's really, really important. And it doesn't mean, what you're talking about doesn't mean that you don't have a budget. It doesn't mean that you go out and buy that Maserati. It doesn't mean that you go out and you live beyond your means. Like, you have to have some discipline about it to make it work. But I think that that's the thing. I mean, if you do that, the payoff is really phenomenal.
It is.
But Chris, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Love these kind of conversations.
Yeah. and appreciate your spending some time with us here today on Power Lunch. It's been a lot of fun. We did have a couple comments and questions. Sorry we didn't get to everything, but we have run out of time. You can check out our schedule at powerlunch.live, powerlunch.live. We've got a great schedule coming up this week. We'll see you tomorrow.